Hello and welcome to a post-game edition of the Nittany Dispatch. I am John Sauber of the Center Daily Times. She is Audrey Snyder of The Athletic, and we are in Milan Puskar Stadium still after a very long day.
Is that how you say it, John? Is that how you really say it?
I don't know.
We're loopy at this point, full disclosure.
Yeah.
We are recording Saturday night, which is never good when you say you're loopy after a noon kick, but that's where we're at.
Yeah, we had a 139-minute delay. Thanks to
2 hours
lightning.
and 19 minutes for those who prefer, normal times.
Yeah, but it seemed like there was a chance that there would be another one. Very glad that never happened, and we never had to deal with it. But there is a lot to talk about already. This was a pretty big win for Penn State, all things considered. I will let you dictate where we go with the jumping off point for this. I think I know where we need to start, but I think this is your time to shine if you want it to be.
Wait, John, can you say that a little bit louder? It's my time to shine. Is that what you said?
I cannot say that any louder now.
Yeah, so Penn State's 34-12 win. For me, we can certainly start and probably even end with the offense, right? Because that was the main storyline. I thought this offense looked really good. I've got a story up on The Athletic about it. I'm sure you've written probably something similar at the Center Daily Times. But, John, I'm going to take my victory lap because we've been here for now 12 hours as I look at this. Actually, no, we've been here 13 hours as we record this. And my pick for the player of the game when we did the preview podcast was Tre Wallace. I said he was the guy we'd be talking about on Sunday. And, John, I don't even remember who you picked, but it doesn't matter because you didn't pick Tre Wallace. Tre Wallace, 5 catches, 117 yards, 2 touchdowns. Wide receiver 1 was targeted 9 times and looked like wide receiver 1, even during the 2 hour and 19-minute rain delay. You know what he did, John? During that delay? He did not even once go back and look at his acrobatic 18-yard touchdown at the end of the first half. And I was like, well, why? Because, I would watch that, and we heard so much about how they had these iPads and how that was beneficial now through the delay. They could rewatch film. And he's like, I knew my feet were down. What was the point? I wasn't going to look at it. Business-like mentality from wide receiver 1. He's toting a football around, which I have the backstory on that. That'll be going up in my piece on The Athletic Sunday morning. So I don't want to spoil that, but there is a story there as to why they're all touting the football or toting the football. I can't even speak. But yeah, that was it. That was my victory lap. I enjoyed it. Maybe I'll be right every week.
Yeah, listen, I think you were definitely less wrong than I was in taking Tre Wallace. I took Tyler Warren, but I do think, and I'll finish this discussion with Tre Wallace. To be clear, I think we should have started with Drew Allar. We will get there in a moment, but I'm with you. I think Tre Wallace is one of the main stories of this game. He looked every bit of a true number 1 option. That was one of my main takeaways from the game. I'll be writing more about that in my Good, Bad, Ugly column that I'll publish Sunday morning, but he was open frequently because he was schemed open and because he was getting open. And he was catching everything that went his way. You mentioned that acrobatic catch. That was that's a high degree of difficulty catch, right? It's not just the concentration; it's the body control.
You and I are not making that catch. To be clear, John.
That is correct.
We're not even getting out of the break.
Even the 50-yard touchdown from Drew Allar, it's a well-run route, well-designed play. I thought it was a really well-thrown ball by Allar to layer it in over the linebacker and in front of the safety to get it to Wallace. But this was just a flat-out different Penn State offense, and a lot of that was Wallace stepped up into a role as a true number 1, and it allowed everybody else to kind of backslide to where they needed to be for this offense to work. That means, I think probably safe to say, Julian Fleming operating as the second best receiver on Saturday. I know he didn't record a catch. I don't even know if he had a target, but
no, he was not targeted, I believe.
Yeah, there were only 17 passing attempts. So that I think that is part of the story here, too, that there was not a lot to go around for everyone. 9 of those went to Wallace. Only Amari Evans received any other targets from Allar among the receivers. And so I still think that what Fleming did on the field as far as his blocking, as far as getting open, I'll be curious to see when you get the snap counts, and we'll discuss that midweek, what they look like, because I believe he was out there, was at least very close, as much as Liam Clifford, the player who was, touted this offseason for, yes. who was touted as he's going to take a step forward. This is going to be, a different year for Liam Clifford. To me, it was Fleming who was out there consistently providing that consistency that this room desperately needed, operating as that number 2 guy. And I think, frankly, if this were a closer game, there would have been more passing attempts, and Penn State would have found the ball gotten the ball to Fleming more, at least targeted him more. Probably true of Clifford too, but for my money, when I was watching it, I'll be curious to see what this looks like on the rewatch. Fleming was getting open fairly consistently. Mm-hmm. It was just, a pass rusher would get there, Drew would scramble, or something would happen where the play was off. But I think it was pretty clear that he was their second most important receiver, I guess, especially because he was mauling people in the running game today. I thought that was one of the most impressive things I saw.
One of the things that stood out to me, and this was on my initial takeaways during the lightning delay, a lot of time to write, but it was how creative the offense was, right? And I think that to me is, you mentioned, and I said, okay, well, Liam Clifford started, and he started alongside Harrison Wallace. Well, we also saw a ton of 2 tight end stuff today, which we knew they've done a lot in the past, so not totally jarring that way. But they didn't have Khalil Dinkins, and that was not a problem, right? Like, you look at what they were able to do. Tyler Warren, like, this is the guy that you go to in your key moments, right? That big 4th down conversion, they went to him. Bo Prabula had a nice touchdown pass. Oh, yeah, I mentioned Bo Prabula. He has a role, John, and they're not just talking about it this year. He has a role, and it exists. And we saw it the 3rd play from scrimmage, and it continued throughout the entire game, and it's going to continue throughout the entire year, right? Like, Andy Kotelnicki showed today he is willing to get a lot of guys involved, right? The whole, if you're one of our best players, you're going to see the field. It's not lip service. That was clear today. I thought Amari Evans was somebody else who had a nice game. Had the big explosive play right at the end of the first half. James Franklin highlighted him as well and said, he was really impressed that Amari Evans was able to fight through contact during the game, and that's something that has not always happened with Evans as he kind of made that transition to wide receiver. So they've got a lot of options. I just, to me, it's like, gosh, I mean, I felt like last year we would say, oh, hey, remember this like one thing that they maybe creatively did once a game, where I was sitting there in the first half and I was like, I just had like 9 or 10 examples of, wow, this is exciting. This is interesting. This is different.
Yeah, I think I was, I was sitting near Rich Scarcella, the Reading Eagle, friend of ours, and I kept calling out personnel groupings with him, right? Like, we'd call it personnel groupings and who was in them, because it was 12 personnel. It wasn't always the same 12 personnel. It was 21 personnel. It wasn't always the same 21 personnel.
Yep.
We saw Andy Kotelnicki mixing and matching. And I think all of this entire conversation we're having about, and we'll get to Allar here soon too, because I think that is the big important thing that came out of this. But the other thing to me is that all of this is about Andy Kotelnicki, right? And what he's bringing to this offense. It's all about the creativity, the formations, the way they present the same play in different ways over and over again, and you can't really adjust to it. The way they use motion to get defenses off balance. Venga Ioane went in motion 3 times today, and those poor defensive players caught one on occasion from him. One time he actually just filled in at his normal left guard spot, right? It was a passing play. I thought that was interesting too. There are variations of that. This isn't just, if Ioane goes in motion, this is going to be like an outside zone or a wide zone play where they try to get outside or find a cutback lane. It's real creativity, and it's meaningful creativity. I guess I would call it creativity with a purpose. This isn't just making stuff up and seeing what sticks. This is setting things up for later in the game. This is doing things in the first quarter so they work better in the third quarter, so another play works better in the fourth quarter. It's a plan that he clearly believes in. It's a playbook that he clearly believes in, and I think that's crucial because it's not just about him believing in it. It's about the players believing in it, and I think it was abundantly clear post-game that all of these guys believe in what Andy Kotelnicki's doing. Not to mention, we talked about that Amari Evans pass right before the end of the first half and the beginning of our 2.5 hour long nightmare.
2 hours and 19 minutes.
Yeah, but if you count actual halftime, it was another 17-ish in there too. But if you listen to the post-game audio or read quotes of what Drew Allar said, he talked about that decision and what went into that. And he just said it's about Kotelnicki, essentially, right? It's about his decision, his aggressiveness in those spots. And I think that's it should be a welcome change of pace for Penn State fans, because I think too often in the past we've seen the offense like turtle up, knee on the ball, go into the half, right? that was a discussion among a few of us on the beat right before the half about what they should do there. And I understand starting the play clock there, or the game clock there, by running it and then going for that quick play right after it, taking the deep shot to kind of catch the defense napping. But doing those sorts of things, taking advantage of your opportunities, is so important, because 32 seconds with one timeout might not seem like much of an opportunity, but you will hit enough that it will matter. And the ways that it goes wrong are so small, right? It's a big interception that gets run back or something. They're more remote possibilities. Honestly, the most likely scenario is they don't score at all. But they're like, he's creating variance that is positive for Penn State.
But
giving
here's the
opportunities
thing,
that wouldn't have
John.
existed.
This is what stood out to me, and I even tweeted this during the game. Last year, I'd be willing to bet we do not see Penn State do that, right? Like,
Right.
this to me was a scenario last year where we'd see it, right? And when they started, they handed the ball off to Nick Singleton and they didn't gain any yards. And I thought, oh, here we go again, right? Like, this is going to be, they're going to turtle up, they're going to take a knee, ride it out to the half. And I'm like, this is pretty crazy. And then next thing you know, there's the big play to Amari Evans. Then you cap the half with the Tre Wallace touchdown. That to me says, one, Andy Kotelnicki is not here to mess around, right? He believes in what he's doing. And it also says your quarterback believes in his wide receiver that he is going to make a play in a critical spot. And then he also believes in another receiver who's going to make another critical play right before the half in Tre Wallace in that insane catch. And those to me are the things that this offense didn't have last year, right? And I think that one example was perfect because last season this offense would not have done that, right? But before we get too far into this thing here, because we are already revved up on hour 13 here at Mountaineer Field, I guess that's the safe way to say it.
You're not
Don't
going
forget
to
to
take a chance?
no, absolutely not. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe to the Nittany Dispatch. If you like what you're hearing, don't forget to tell a friend. You can subscribe on YouTube as our push to 1,000 subscribers continues. We will be here post game every game this season. We'll be doing our midweek stuff as normal as well. But yeah, to me, there are so many layers to today, as there are to every game. But season openers, like you and I, have enough stuff that we could probably talk about for like a week here because it was different, it was refreshing, it was creative. And then there was that delay that just kind of could have sucked our souls and could have sucked the momentum away from the offense, and it didn't. I think that part also is important.
Yeah, but I think the delay is a nice microcosm of, there are going to be things that tried to derail this offense. This is something I wrote about, right? That there were plenty of things that could have derailed Drew Allar today, and I think this is probably our best chance to talk about him and what he did. The clapping by the defense to try and get the offense to jump, which worked once. Forced a fumble by Allar. It was a mistimed snap that Nick Dawkins thought it was Allar clapping, and he snaps the ball and it goes off Allar, and West Virginia recovers.
John, this is something with teams in the East. Remember when we had Clapgate when they played Pitt all
Yeah.
those years ago?
Yes.
Clapgate again strikes Penn State.
Yeah, and Allar was frustrated and angry, and he was yelling at the refs, and we haven't usually seen that.
Drew Allar was pissed off. We haven't seen that before. Like, I was sitting there watching that with my binoculars, and I'm like, ooh, this is new. Like, he is lighting into this ref, which again is a good example of how he's different this year, right? Like, last year, Drew Allar does not do that, right? I think he would just kind of slink back to the sideline, probably hear it from Mike Yursich. But he said, listen, I heard the clap. I knew that Nick was not, he was just going on sound. And I didn't clap my hands. And he's like, I cannot let the referee get away with that. So he was passionate. And then he said, yeah, I probably should have kept my cool a little better. But he channeled his Matt McGloin there a little bit.
Yeah, and he was frustrated, and he was enthusiastic though at other points in the game too, right? Where he'd get a first down, and then he would point and signal that he got the first down. He'd stiff armed the defender, and that got up with some aggression on the sideline, right? Like he was about to say something to the defender. We obviously couldn't hear if anything happened there, but there were a lot of chances for him to go back to the original point to kind of falter, right? For him to fall off schedule, a 3-and-out here or there. Drives that were stalled out for whatever reason. He could have turned into that quarterback from last year. He didn't. He stayed the course. He was more confident. tend to believe that that's because his offensive coordinator clearly believes in him and has faith in him and his confidence in his players, which I think is important, but also because Drew Allar, now at 20 years old instead of 19 years old, is a very different person and quarterback than he was last year. He's confident. He believes in himself. He believes in the offense. He believes in what he's doing. And now he has a real chance to reclaim, I think, some of the momentum he had when he was a recruit and when he got to Penn State, that maybe he had lost some of that shine last year and wasn't as highly touted. But I think he put himself in position today to change the narrative around who he is as a quarterback.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Drew Allar, again, it's not necessarily the sexiest stat line. 11 to 17, 216 yards, 3
Pretty
touchdowns.
good.
He was interception free, right? But I'm thinking only 17 attempts is the thing that a lot of people I think are going to look at and say, oh, that seems kind of low. Again, you have so many weapons on this offense, and it speaks to it. But the thing, John, that we didn't get to yet with Drew Allar, which again, different guy that we would not see last year, 6 rushes for 44 yards. We heard about, he's more mobile than you think, right? We're going to have him do just enough with his legs this year, is what James Franklin said at the start of preseason. And that held true, right? And James Franklin mentioned that, which I'm afraid to say it because I'm afraid that people are going to
because
mess
it's going
up
to
his
lead
name.
to the yes.
Yeah. But they make a reference to Drew Allar and Lamar Jackson that has been going on since his freshman year on the practice field. And but I don't
to
get
clear
it.
this up real quick, the basis of Drew's pronunciation, can you
Drew
clarify this?
Allar.
Because I think, yes.
It's Drew Allar. Quarterback
Right.
Drew Allar, Penn State. His name is Drew Allar. Drew Allar.
Yes. This has been asked to his parents, to him, like it is Drew Allar. And it seems that there's still some
not like
confusion
something
about
else.
that. But
yeah, but that's why I'm not going to say it. But they have this
right.
name with Lamar Jackson, and because it's like, he's mobile. It was in jest.
It's Lamar Allar if you were to mispronounce his last name, but that's not how you pronounce his last name, and that's going to become a thing if we do it. So we're not going to do it.
We're not gonna feed into it because then I'm gonna mispronounce it, and then I'm gonna look like an idiot more so than usual. But yeah, to me, the mobility piece was really important, right? And you mentioned the swag, right? After he was making some of those plays, he was demonstrative. We haven't seen that before. I think that part of that is the belief. Part of that is the early success. And I think this is, right, game 1 is always kind of the launching point. Like, this is the barometer. We saw it now. But John, I just want to kind of caution people here because you and I were probably having a similar conversation last year after West Virginia, where Drew looked great. Keandre Lambert-Smith had the kind of the gaudy stat line, and we said, okay, there's wide receiver 1. The offense is going to be explosive. But to me, this year, it feels different and it seems more realistic because there are so many different players. Nick Singleton had a great game, 13 rushes, 114 yards, and a touchdown. To me, also, the number of players that were involved, right? The fact that we haven't had to go all season about hearing about this Bo Prabiola package, that it came out of the gate and was productive. To me, that matters. So yeah, to me, this is a more believable that the offense is going to be good than last year was, with the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah, but the other thing, I want to go back real quick. You mentioned his rushing. I actually thought his most impressive scramble wasn't one of those plays where he ran for a first down. If you remember, he scrambled to his right. There was nothing there, and he saw a gap between the offensive line and split 2 of his own offensive linemen to go back the other way, and he ended up gaining like 5 yards and was short of the first down. But it's one of those things where it takes a lot of confidence to make that decision and like a lot of belief in yourself. And again, I know we've harped on these kind of nebulous concepts with what he did today. There is like real things that he did too that I'll mention here in a second. But we're talking a lot about confidence and everything. That was so much of the issue last year. He looked like, frankly, that he wasn't ready for some of the big time throws he had to make, and decisions he had to make. This year he does. But I want to go to some of those big time throws. Right, there was a throw. I was talking to some people in the NFL that were here at the game. One of the throws that people kept mentioning was the out route. I believe it was to Tre Wallace, and it was from Drew was on one hash, and he had to throw it to the opposite sideline past that hash, right? So pretty much almost the
Yep.
length of the field. That's like a 40-yard throw
Crazy.
horizontally, and then to get it however many yards downfield it was. But it was a dart, like it was a gorgeous throw. I think it was from the left hash all the way to the right sideline. It was an on the money throw, the kind that makes you like stop and go, whoa, okay, like this is a different level of arm talent. And that deep ball that was a little bit short to Amari Evans that he had to fight back for and win the contested catch right before the half. That wasn't. I know it. James Franklin jokingly called it a duck and everything, but I think it traveled like 60 yards in the air. Like this was not a short throw or like a 40-yard throw that he didn't get there. He threw the ball 60 yards. Now, no one will sit here and tell you that was his best throw. It was not one of his better throws. He definitely could have done better. But I think that's a nice indicator of how strong his arm is and the kind of throws he can make, because it's traveling 60 yards in the air. And it's like, yeah, he still probably could have gotten more out of that if he threw it at his optimal distance.
Yeah, and that's why James Franklin pointed to the third down conversions. Penn State was 5 of 11, and he's like, we've got room for improvement there. Like, he thought, that was kind of part of the inconsistencies. I believe, if my memory is correct, which big if on a day like today, Penn State had just three and outs today, which felt like, there were many times last year we'd see that in a quarter. It was just a different offense. But yeah, I think the Drew Allar is back narrative, I think, is correct, right? Like, I think
Yes.
the hyped prospect that got here is what you're going to see this year and not the guy that you saw last year, right? And I think that's going to hold true for a lot of these players on the team, right? Because you're seeing it today, right? How many times last year did we say with Nick Singleton, okay, he'd maybe get one run and the play call would get away from him, and then they do whatever, and then, oh, he's not really getting going, and when's he going to get over 100 yards, and are we fixating on this number? Well, then he comes out of the gate and looks really strong, looks like the guy that you saw freshman year. And so for me, it just kind of goes back to the baffling point of what the world happened last year, right? Like, I think, can you imagine, right, if you were Mike Yurcich, and I don't know if he did or not, I have no idea, but if you watched this game today, right, you had the same personnel for the most part last year, right? This is what it looked like this year. This is what it looked like last year, right? Like, it was just night and day, and I think that was really telling, just kind of about, obviously there were strides made. Like, Harrison Wallace said that the receiving core, um, they knew that this was not nearly good enough last year and that they took that to heart this summer. And he said, yeah, the media, he said this today, he said, yeah, the media was harsh on us. And I mean, it was probably fair. At least
It
what
was
you and I
earned.
said, I'm sure was fair. It
Yeah.
was earned. That's right. Um, and he said that they made it a point to say, we are not going to do this again. Like, we're going to put in
Yeah.
the extra time this summer. We're going to go above and beyond. Because I think there was a level of embarrassment with last year for them, right? And you went 10-2, but yeah, you were kind of, your position group was the punching bag, and this offense was the punching bag. And so I think it was really nice to see the players kind of rally around that and say, hey, we're not going to do this again. Here's what has to change. We're going to identify it. We're going to fix it throughout the offseason. And today was their chance to go and show that they are different. And I now am convinced this is a different offense, right? We got all the blended talk that people freaked out about in the offseason. It's a different offense. It's a new offense. It's a creative offense. And you have a receiving core that, again, it's a one-game sample size. You have to do it consistently. But today they were not the weak link, right? Today they were not a problem at all. In fact, they were a highlight. And so that, kudos to them for taking that step forward, and changing, the narrative about this season, because for this program to go to where it wants to go, which is the college football playoff and beyond, they need this offense to be explosive, and it was today. And they need this receiving core to be much improved, and today it also was.
I will address all of that in a moment. But first, I want to tell you about Voodoo Brewery in State College, located at 201 Elmwood Street in State College, Pennsylvania. As I said, Voodoo is a place that Audrey and I have frequented for several years now. A nice working environment for us, frankly. You can find quiet space there if you need it. You can find, outdoor seating to sit and drink and sit by the stream and enjoy the nice weather outside when it's there. They have space heaters outside, or excuse me, the heating tables outside to keep you warm when it gets cold out. And of course, they have great beer that you and I love. The ambiance, with you will, if you will, at Voodoo is one of my favorites. It is an enjoyable place to be, and frankly, a place that you and I spent quite a bit of time at.
You say ambiance, John, and I look behind me, and I am in somebody's suite here in the stadium.
Yes.
And you can see, maybe I'll lift my computer up. You can see the windows are fogging, the fields down there. Yeah, this is the real ambiance of covering a noon kick with a lightning delay. But yeah, I mean, it is, to me, again, John, we're 25 minutes in. We haven't even said a word about the defense, which feels a lot like last year, except instead of us just ripping the offense to shreds, we were just nice about it, which feels very weird. Like, there's not, I'm going to say it, which I think you'll agree with me on this. I don't know. We didn't talk about this, but there are not a lot of negatives to nitpick after today.
Yeah, I think the one thing that you could probably pick nits with is Abdul Carter's performance at times. It felt uneven. It felt, he, honestly, he looked gassed at times, rushing the passer that frequently, which I'll be curious to see how much he's impacted by that moving forward. But this was a defense that I thought was at the top of its game. And real quick, to go back to what you said about the offense, I am a firm believer that this is a new offense, that this is not something that we're going to be talking about in anywhere near the way we did last year. But this defense is also a new defense, and we're not going to be talking about it in the same way that we did last year, even if it has the same results that it did last year. I think I feel more confident than ever that my preseason pick for it to be easily a top 5 team in SP Plus is going to be accurate. Like, this is a unit that plays aggressively. They play fast. They're trying to force turnovers. They're trying to pressure the opponent. And even guys that we knew a lot about, Kobe King, Devon J. Thomas, they looked different out there. Kobe King especially, I thought, looked like a different player. Now, the caveat is that he wasn't asked to play in space a ton. West Virginia is not necessarily trying to air it out with these big weapons on the outside, but trying to run the ball. I said it in our preview pod, this is the kind of offense that feeds into what Penn State is defensively and what they want to do defensively. That being said, Penn State excelled in the ways that you would want them to excel if you're a Penn State fan. They looked like an elite defense, like a defense that can dictate the terms of play. And I think that's going to be really important, because when you look at, and we're 2 months away from this still, but when you look at Ohio State and the way that they're going to have to play this year with Will Howard, a quarterback, it should and will likely be run heavier, as things were under Chip Kelly in the later years when he was head coach at UCLA. And this is a nice, I don't want to say they're a poor man's version of Ohio State, but it's essentially a good version of the elite Ohio State team.
Now we're gonna get angry West Virginia fans in the comment because you just said that.
Listen, if West Virginia fans want to say their offense is as good as Ohio State's, then by all means,
delusional.
Sip that Kool-Aid. You're incorrect. But this is a good version of an elite team, rather than that actual elite version. Same thing. They use 2 different running backs. Obviously, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins are both different than West Virginia's running backs and way better. Will Howard is better than Garrett Green, although I think that's a little bit closer, as I've said in the past. But this is the kind of game it's going to look like, with the exception that Ohio State has some of the best receivers in the country, and you're also going to have to deal with that. That being said, the corners didn't look too shabby either.
No, and it's interesting that you guys were having that conversation at your end of the press box, because at my end, that also same thing was mentioned was, hey, yeah, but how's this going to hold up against Ohio State, right? Because again, that's the barometer. And that it's good for Penn State when that is your barometer, because it means that realistically we can have this conversation, right? If we're saying, well, hey, how does Penn State measure up to some of these other programs? That's not the goal for this team, right? Like, that's not what the aim is here. But yeah, I mean, I think really the only questions that we had, and really there weren't even questions. It was, okay, we know they have good corners, but who starts, and does it really matter who starts? I believe, John, I think I was also correct on that, because I picked AJ Harris and Jalen Kimber, and I believe you went with Cam Miller.
Yes, I was a little surprised by this. Now, Kimber looked good, clearly a good decision. I also thought Cam Miller looked good. I think this is more an indication of how good those top three guys are. And frankly, one thing I was a little surprised about, it didn't seem like there was a ton of rotating early at corner, right? It seemed like
Correct.
AJ Harris wasn't really coming off the field. It seemed like Jalen Kimber wasn't really coming off the field. Davian Collins got in there a little bit. Cam Miller was the backup to Jalen Reed at the Lion position, and
Hmm.
I thought excelled in that spot. There was one play where West Virginia ran a route combo that led to, I believe they were shifted out. They shifted back into a stack on the far side away from us, and the front of the stack was Cam Miller's guy that he was pressing against, and he stuck with him the whole way, and it blew up the play. It was clear that they had an out route and a corner route combination on that side. It looked like Garrett Green was trying to get it to the corner route, had to throw it to the out route, and the ball ends up falling between the corner and the out to nobody because there was no real play there, and that was because of Cam Miller. I do think that their top three, Davian Collins looked good. There wasn't anything that stood out, but I think their top three are probably pretty clear at this point. I will be curious to see if any of Elliott Washington, Zion Tracy, or Davian Collins kind of step up into more major roles. Washington, I thought, looked all right when he
I was
played,
gonna
but
say, yeah, we did
again,
see
later in the game.
Washington a little bit. Yeah, I mean, to me, that and it's the same thing when you look at their safeties and you hit on Reed, who is lights out in this game, especially early on. I thought that was, you look at that and you say, okay, well, how much are we gonna see them, try and get these five DBs on the field? I'll be curious when I go back and look at kind of snap counts and the distribution there. I think we'll have a better idea of how things looked. But that to me was just kind of from first blush watching it live. You said, okay, this secondary is gonna be good yet again. To me, like you have the Drew Allar, the fumble on the clapped cadence. Um, you have that moment, and right away they come back. I believe it was Abdul Carter with the pressure,
Yeah,
Jalen Reed with the recovery, and it's like, okay, there's your first sudden change moment of the season, and the defense comes up with a massive play right there. So I think, you know, again, this defense, like the offense, they'll get their footing as the season rolls along. I did want to kind of pick some substitution things out here. Obviously, we know the starting defensive ends at Bill Carter, Deni, Dennis Sutton. Um, did you catch John, who was the third guy in?
I mean Vanover,
Uh huh. And who's the fourth guy?
I believe Smith Filbert, correct?
Yeah, this is you. You passed my quiz. Very good, John. Um, but yeah, I mean,
I
so you
thought you were going
kind
to
of
pop something I didn't know on me
no,
for a
no, no,
second.
no. So sometimes I just I just like to throw questions out there. Um, but I think those right, like you're looking at the depth and how are they going to build it because you're going to need it throughout the season, right? And we saw it along the interior. Alonzo Ford was in there early. And I think that's kind of one of those things. You saw Hakeem Beeman rotate in there. You mentioned Devon J. Thomas starting opposite Zane Durant. And so they've got all of these different guys, but how do you maximize their skill sets, right? And I think we've even seen it before, depending on your opponent, right? Again, along the interior, maybe you see one of those guys who's going to play more in a certain matchup than somebody else. But yeah, this defense just does not give us a lot to really complain or,
Yeah,
or pick apart because they've been
the
so
one thing
sound for so long.
the one player I want to point out as being, I thought he was the best player on that side of the ball by a good margin, and that's not a knock on anyone else. I thought everyone was really good on that side for the most part. But I thought Jalen Reed was everywhere and really excelled in that fifth defensive back position. It felt like to me, and I didn't get a chance to talk to him post game. It's a little, there are some time constraints there that makes it a little tough on us to get to everyone we want to. But I thought he played more freely, right? Like I thought he was more comfortable moving closer to the line of scrimmage, kind of playing all over the place and seeing what happens in front of him and like watching it play out before it actually happens, then getting there before the play actually plays out. That first play of the game for West Virginia, they take a deep shot on a post route. Looked like I'd have to go back and rewatch just to make
Mm-hmm.
sure, but like he broke that up, right? Like that easily could have been a massive play for West Virginia, but he broke that up. He made that play happen, and he was the one who essentially like stopped them from getting this massive momentum kick to start the game. And then I believe that drive ended, or at least was near the end of that drive, where they tried to screen, and he blew that up too. He was
Yes.
legitimately
Yep.
everywhere. He was making plays on the ball. He was making plays away from the ball in coverage. I thought he was phenomenal. I thought he was their best defensive player today. And I think if this is what he's going to look like in that role, then like this is the sky is the limit for him, not just collegiately, but like in the NFL too, right? Like this is going to open
Yep.
doors for him that maybe we didn't think were open prior to this season.
Yeah, I thought this was a massive step forward for him. I just pulled up the stat sheet. You know, he had the tackle for loss, 2 pass breakups, and then 9 tackles, which we could kind of parse that however you want. But I think KJ Winston led the team with 12 tackles, and he also had a forced fumble as well. So again, you look
For
at
what
your
it's worth, KJ
mhm,
Winston had 7 solo tackles.
mhm,
Jalen Reed, 3 of his 9 were
solos.
solo tackles.
Mhm,
I think, and this is a story for another day and an argument for another
yeah.
day. I think tackles are probably a pretty unreliable
Mhm.
stat for a lot of reasons. One of them is there is a lot of subjectivity to who gets awarded the tackle and when. And I think it's probably not a good indicator of what is necessarily going on the field.
Well, and it also kind of makes you wonder, well, what happened at the other levels, right? If your safeties are getting a lot of tackles, right? That's always the other piece to it
That's
that you're
true.
like, well,
That being said,
but
Reed was pretty close to the line for a good chunk of the game.
yes, yes. What were your impressions, John, of Tony Rojas today? Because I thought there were some splash plays from him as well.
There were some splash plays, and I think it is really clear that he is a really good fit next to Kobe King, along with being their best linebacker already. Like I think Rojas is already that guy. Frankly, I thought Rojas played better at linebacker than what I saw from Carter last year when he was playing that position. I thought he was making decisions quicker. I thought he was not necessarily chasing the play as much. That was something we talked about a lot last year that I thought Abdul Carter did, where
Hmm.
he would chase the play and kind of get out in front of things too early and try and make a play rather than make the right play. Uh, and I think Tony Rojas played within himself really well today. I do think depth there is a concern. Tyler Elson, I thought struggled at times, but I think the top two are legit. I thought Dom DeLuca was good too when they went to the base and when he was out there, as the second linebacker and the two linebacker spots. But yeah, it is not a position of concern, and I think that's largely because of obviously King, but also Rojas being the kind of playmaker that you need at linebacker to have value, the kind of guy who can defend in space, play coverage really well in zone, not lose a spot, but also man up against tight ends and running backs, and make plays in the running game because he's an athletic freak who can get downhill and attack and sack and shed offensive linemen without too much issue.
Yeah, and I think this is where, right, like we want to see, and again, the conversation is going to change drastically the next few weeks, because after Bowling Green and Kent State, we're going to be talking really about depth and developmental pieces. So it's kind of going to be scaled back a bit. But I wanted to go back to something you said earlier, John, about Abdul Carter. Um, the thing that still strikes me with him, and I don't at this point, because again, it's year 3, like, it's not gonna change, when you see him, he looks the part, right? Like, it's just noticeable right away, he looks different. Dani Dennis Sutton looks different, right? You see those guys. There were a lot of NFL scouts that were here today. A lot of eyes were on those 2, especially Abdul, early on in the game, and I'm with you in that his stat line was not it's not going to pop off if we say, hey,
I
this
don't
is,
even
arguably, but I don't think that doesn't always tell the full story, right? Like, I want to kind of
for
curtail
sure.
that because there were some moments where I'm with you and that there are times he looked gassed, but also I think there were some other plays when you go back and look too that it's like, okay, Abdul's there, and look at the extra attention that they have to pay him because he's on the field, right? Like, so there's those things that make him tough to gauge. But I think when fans look at it, right, like you and I both said, this is going to be one of the best defensive players in the country. Today's performance doesn't necessarily align statistically with that, but I
Yes.
don't think it's cause for concern either.
No, I don't think it's cause for concern, but I do think there is a little bit with Abdul Carter of the traits don't always match the production, right? Like, and you want to see him get pressures and get sacks, get QB hits, and all that. But I'm not even necessarily talking about that. You mentioned the attention that he draws. Sometimes he's just out of place too often. You know what I mean? Like he has taken
Mhm.
himself out of a play because of his positioning, because he tries to get ahead of a play and he's susceptible to counters. He's susceptible to trap plays, things like that. Like he too often, like I said, is I think trying to make that big play, and he's more than capable of it. Right? There will be times where I say that he's trying to do that. And then he does it because he's that athletically gifted, and he is diagnosing these plays. He's just, again, probably getting a little too far ahead of himself sometimes. I still think he is a chance to be one of the best defense players in the country this year. Still think he has a chance to be a top 10 pick, if not a likely top 10 pick this year. But I do think that it is going to – today is a good indication that the transition to full-time pass rushing isn't always easy. It probably is a little less taxing not taking on a 300-pound offensive tackle on every pass play, and when you can just drop into coverage. Not that dropping into coverage isn't taxing either, right?
It's not a walk in the park, yeah.
It's a different type of exertion, and I think that's going to be an adjustment that we'll see, and I'm curious to see how it plays out. You mentioned, though, I was really impressed with the Dennis Sutton. You talk about commanding the double teams. I think he had their attention all day long, and I do mean all day long because the game from start to finish was just under 6 hours.
It's been a day.
Yes, but I think there is some truth to what you and I said in the preseason about Nittany being the more productive player, and maybe the player that I guess people are projecting Abdul Carter to be a little bit, at least for Penn State. That can change at the next level where that freakish athleticism matters more because everyone is an elite athlete. When you're a cut above that can make you a real difference maker. But I think for now, I think it's okay to temper your expectations for Abdul Carter and what he looks like this year. He's still a player going through a position change. He's still a really gifted player, but he's also not a finished product, And I think this goes for a lot of these guys we're going to end up talking about. KJ Winston, Drew Allar, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen. Like Allen, by the way, we didn't mention him. He had 10 carries for like 20 yards. It was not his best day. There will be games where he does what Nick Singleton did. I remain unconcerned from that standpoint.
We saw both of them on the field at the same time too.
Yes, and Wallace with both of them, or with each at different times. Each part of the
so that's number 3 running back. Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, I just think there will be moments this year, and hopefully for Penn State, those moments come against Bowling Green, Kent State, Illinois, even UCLA, and not USC, Wisconsin, Ohio State, because they will be more consequential then. But I do think there will be moments where you can just still point to the youth. We said Drew Allar is a changed quarterback, a changed player, a changed person. He's still 20 years old. And I think that is really, really important not to forget, because a lot of the criticism levied at him, whether it's that he can't handle stuff emotionally or that he can't meet the moment in these big games or whatever it is, that he's, his reaction to stuff isn't the right reaction or whatever that even means. I think it is important to note that last season we were talking about a 19-year-old kid making his first starting at quarterback for the first time. And yes, it is fair to be critical of him for the mistakes he made and everything like that. But I think it also shouldn't be that surprising then that he got better. If you consider how different you were from, your age 19 to age 20 year, like it happens, right?
I don't even remember that year, John. That's the problem. I don't even remember that.
But I think it's perfectly normal that he is progressing, and like that he is progressing in a way that is positive for Penn State fans and frankly really positive for this program.
And I was just saying, it's also positive for his trajectory too. When you look at kind of the pro outlook for him, this is the upward trend that you want to see, that you need to see. And I think he's on track with that. I did want to, because we didn't hit on this earlier, Anthony Donko was the starting right tackle and played, I'll have to go back and look at the snaps, but by my account played pretty much all of it. I mean, I saw Nolan Rucci come on when they had an extra lineman in. We also saw them do that with Cooper Cousins along the interior when they had an extra lineman. But first glance, it felt like Donko was out there a ton, that there was not much rotation. Now, again, we went down to the field with the last 7 to 9 minutes waiting for elevators and all that good stuff. So
turned into 4.5 minutes.
Yeah, partially, like they were going through the stands, and it was John, it is pouring now. Oh, buddy, we're gonna have a bad walk to our cars after this. Yeah,
which is probably. I was gonna say it probably means this is a good place to leave it for this week.
Either leave it or keep going. Yeah, well, I wanted to get to. We didn't see a field goal attempt today. We saw Sanders Hayek on extra points.
No, we did. We did some field goal attempt late. Yes, I think you were still on your way down. Sanders Hayek attempted what I believe was
going to the media room.
He pulled it to the right on the 46-yard attempt, so it seems clear that he's the field goal kicker and the extra point kicker. But yeah, Caden Saunders didn't play an offensive snap that I can recall. Was out there returning punts. this is a little bit of speculation on my part, but it sure seems like that he probably wasn't good enough to go at wide receiver and make those moves, but he was good enough to stand and catch a punt and fair catch it every single time. So there was no concerns about anyone muffing punts back there. But yeah, I think that's a probably a good place to leave it. Do not forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. We appreciate all of our listeners, whether it's audio or video. If you are watching us on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button down below. Hit the subscribe button. That really helps us out. We really appreciate it. Follow Audrey on Twitter at OddSnyder4. Follow me on Twitter at John Sauber, where you can find me complaining about the delay, threatening to, oh, I don't like the look of that
It's
rain.
bad. It's
You can find me complaining about the delay, threatening to take a nap if they do it again. You can find all of Audrey's writing at The Athletic, where she wrote about the game today. You can find mine at centerdaily.com, CENTRE daily.com, where I wrote about the game today. We'll be writing more about the game today. Audrey will be writing more about the game today, and we will have
John,
you covered.
what if I just sleep here? Like, there's a nice little. It's a small couch. I don't have an umbrella.
There's a couch in here.
I have some popcorn that I've been eating clearly throughout this podcast.
I think I might be in the athletic director's suite here. I'm not entirely sure. But there's a couch in here that I might crash on and just lock the door so everyone leaves me alone. But yeah, we are in for it on the walk back to our cars. And this is a great place to leave it. Please rate, review, and subscribe. As I said, we look forward to talking to everyone once again, probably Tuesday or Wednesday this week, sometime midweek, to go a little bit further into the film of what we saw against West Virginia, preview Bowling Green a little bit, and continue moving along throughout this 2024 season for Penn State. So we'll leave it there. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.